Hey Audrey, how's it going?
Hey, Zach. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for taking the time to jump on and join us again.
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit right before we started, and I want to say that you are the first repeat guest we've had on the podcast.
Oh, that's very exciting.
As we were talking about it, I think you said that you were number eight originally. So, way back when we started the podcast, you were like episode
Yes.
eight,
Yes.
and here we are in the 60s at this point, at the time of recording. Um, and so you're back, and I am really glad to have you back. I'm glad that we didn't scare you away the first time.
Oh, no.
Um, but yeah, as we normally do now, like to kind of start with just you introduce yourself, talk about your background and perspective. So folks, if they haven't already heard of you or know about your work, have an idea where you're coming from with the chat we're going to have.
Yeah, totally. I studied in undergrad theater and math. You might not know that about me.
I didn't.
It was a while ago, and design as we practice it today wasn't really a thing. But my dad worked in tech since before you could get a degree actually in computer science. So we had like a Radio Shack TRS 80 in our house, affectionately known as a Trash 80. And we had Apple IIs and we had Trashes and Lisa's and all that stuff. So my summer job was always doing QA or whatever for tech companies when I was in high school and college. So I graduated and I wanted to be an actor. I moved out to California in the mid 90s, um, and thought like, okay, well, I'll act. That means I need a day job because waiting tables pays better at night, but hopefully I'm acting. And so I ended up working at a little company that did CD-ROMs. And then I ended up at Netscape, like back in the olden days when we used to have like skim 2% and whole milk in all the fridges across the campus because Andreessen used to drink it out of the carton when wandered around the campus. And so I got to work there with I was kind of around when Ben Horowitz was developing his good product manager, bad product manager thing. I got to work directly for Marty Kagan, which was amazing, and Hugh Deverly, also like a luminary in the design industry, who did the Knowledge Navigator for Apple back in the day. So that was a pretty extraordinary experience. I got hooked on design, the kind of right brain, left brainness of design.
Mm,
And since then, I've worked for Hugh at Deverly Design Office, but also inside companies as a designer, as a design leader, and then outside companies. Right now, I'm head of growth at a company called Design Map that does product strategy and design.
nice. There was some stuff in there that I didn't know about you, and we've known each other for years.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fascinating for me. Conversation for probably non-podcast stuff sometime for me to ask about some of that in your background. But
You should see I still have my Rolodex. I ran the net search page, which you might or might not remember because you were probably too young, Zach, but it was like the search button that had Excite, Lycos, Hotbot, all
yeah,
those dead companies. And I got to meet all those people and still have my Rolodex from that time. So I have a little Elon Musk business card from when he had a little Yellow Pages company called Zip2. And there's some good stories about the olden days.
that is madness to even think about. It seems like, I mean, literally ancient history at this point, but that's super
I
cool.
know that usually I
Um,
don't confess exactly how long I've been in the industry.
well, I mean, it's still fun stories.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay. So appreciate the background here. And, part of the reason that we were going to jump on and chat today is because of some new thoughts and discoveries that
Yeah.
you've been having. And I don't want to do it any injustice. So I'm just going to ask you, why don't you introduce some of the stuff, some of the recent learnings and thoughts about design as a whole, how it's happening in companies?
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of the phrase the value of design or the ROI of design. I say that sarcastically.
Never comes up.
Yeah. I don't know about you. I'm sick to death of talking about that. And I spent many years kind of like on the bandwagon trying to make the case. I wrote a book called What CEOs Need to Know About Design. The first chapter is like, hey, go look at the IBM Forrester report, go look at the DMI index, go look at these things. And, design isn't just for the sake of design. It adds real value to your business, top line and bottom line, blah, 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 blah. And I still believe that. But I'm a little bit tired of talking about it, to be honest with you. And we actually recently ran like a little salon of VPs of design, which are often our clients, to sit and chat about whatever topic came to mind for them. And that was a big topic, was like, we're still talking about the value of design. We're still talking about the ROI of design. How do we measure the value of design? And I don't know if you've seen the recent article, the kind of gaslighting around the ROI of design that got a lot of interest. So one of the things that we started doing with our clients is measuring what we're calling shadow design. So changing the conversation a little bit and saying, okay, let's do a survey of engineers, QA people, product managers, business analysts, executives, like marketers, like everybody that we can get to participate. Let's run the survey with them and let's find out how many hours non-designers are spending doing design work. And we're careful to kind of qualify and define that in a way that non-designers can, like, we don't want to get too much in the weeds, but we want to be clear. If you're in a conversation with somebody else about design, we don't want to count that. But if you're like solo at your desk doing design or research, and this is interesting for researchers as well, then we want to know it. And what we're seeing is jaw-dropping numbers come back. Thousands and thousands of hours come back. We had one client run this. They had a 12-person design team for an organization that had something like 100 engineers. So the ratio is like maybe okay. But they found 22 full-time employees worth of work, design work, being done by people who are not designers. So borrowing the shadow IT phrase, right? We're calling this shadow design. And then what we're suggesting with our clients or anybody who wants to run this, right, is to say, like, okay, let's stop talking about how you need to invest more in design. There's so much good ROI, so let's invest, right? That's the I of ROI. Let's just look at how much we're spending on design today. We're already spending it. The money is gone. It's like out the door. But are we spending it intentionally, and are we spending it well? And if the answer to either of those questions is no, then let's like recalibrate some of that spend. So whether it's budget or headcount, let's shift some of that so that we're paying designers to do design work, which presumably is going to be better. Certainly there are plenty of product managers and engineers out there that do great design, and I don't want to imply that they don't, but we would be sort of flabbergasted if we were paying designers to write production code, right? So why are we doing the inverse? So this is a different take on the value of design conversation. It's just like, let's invest wisely rather than arguing that we should invest more.
Totally. And that's why I thought this was going to be such a good topic to discuss on the show, because there is a lot still happening, especially with market conditions, global economic conditions, right, around the discussion of ROI of UX, ROI of UX research. It doesn't matter. And so I thought this was very apropos, that conversation as well. And so the first thing I kind of want to ask you is, have you ever experienced, and you've clearly got a lot of experience in our industry, right? Have you ever experienced engineering teams needing to justify the ROI of engineering, for example?
No.
That's just a blanket question. So the answer is no, which I kind of expected you to say. Yeah. So then the next thing is, when you talk about shadow design, it's one thing to say, well, they're just getting design good enough for certain things. I, again, would fall back to the question, and this is genuine curiosity. I'm not trying to plant anything here, but, would organization accept shadow development for example, to find out that not necessarily like ideal or non-qualified engineers doing engineering work elsewhere in the organization? It's a genuine question.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, nobody looks at shadow IT as a positive, right? I don't think that phrase is used as like, oh, we don't have enough. Nobody ever said, we don't have enough shadow IT happening in our organization. We need more of it. And
Yeah.
similarly, nor would they say, we don't have enough shadow engineering happening in our
Mhm.
organization. And nothing against IT and engineering, like that wouldn't be appropriate. We want IT people to do IT stuff. It's important.
Yeah,
We want engineers to write production code. That's important.
totally. And just, I realize that there's some people listening to this, they might not know entirely what shadow IT is. Can you give a little bit of background what we're talking about there?
Yeah. So shadow IT is a phrase that often IT organizations use to describe individuals doing IT type stuff without the knowledge or support of the IT team. So maybe they're installing software locally. Maybe they're spinning up a website. Maybe they're even like getting an app built, but
Mhm.
IT doesn't know about it. And so it's not generally viewed as a positive thing.
Right. And I suspect there are a number of reasons for that. Security risks, compliance challenges, stuff like that. So I bring that up as a way to sort of bring it back to shadow design and say, well, then why is shadow design bad, right? Because there's going to be an argument for it happening and saying, well, it's fine. It's just people good enough. They understand design good enough. And I'm sure that those are similar arguments in shadow IT, right? So it's like, well, then if somebody were to ask that, why does it matter? Why is it a big deal?
Yeah. Um, so many points to make here. Let's see if I can capture like half of them. But the first one I want to start with is let's not confuse production and design.
Mm,
So when I say design, I don't mean just drawing screens, although that's part of it, and it might be a lot of what's happening in shadow design, but it's probably not all of it, right? So we're talking about bigger things like strategy, insights, alignment, vision, research, like all of these things, right? So that's one bit is we're talking about more than just like good enough screens. We're talking about other things. Another point is that sometimes in these or often I don't know that many organizations that are like, oh, the velocity of our engineering team is great. It's faster than we expected, right? Or our product managers are way ahead of, they're doing everything that we asked
yeah.
for and more. Like product design, Marty Kagan talks about, or sorry, product management. Marty talks about product management being like a 50-hour a week, 60-hour a week job.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have enough to do. And so do
Mm-hmm.
engineers. And so what you see is like as a symptom is slowing down of some parts of the organization. And then again, if it is just production, one, if you want to intentionally say like, okay, let's have engineers do production work, then um, okay, I have some ideas about that, about getting engineers to do better and faster production work. But two, you can probably get a production designer cheaper than you can
Mm,
get an engineer. So I do think engineers and designers with a similar level of experience are probably, let's just say for the sake of argument, the pay is pretty similar. But if you have an engineer doing production design work, you could probably save some money by just bringing in a production designer. And then,
yeah.
oh, by the way, the quality is going to improve just by the fact that they live in the design org. And so there's going to be more consistency. Maybe it's easier to leverage component libraries. Maybe they have better oversight. Maybe they get training and they improve over time, like all that stuff. That was
Yeah.
a lot of
No, that's really good. And it makes me think of an analogy which I'm a big fan of in terms of like explaining stuff or understanding it myself, which I thought of, like being an auto mechanic. It's a pretty specialized set of skills. Now, maybe your local plumber knows how to fix cars, and maybe they both make roughly the same, but it's likely the plumber is going to take longer to diagnose and fix the problem,
Mhm.
which ultimately costs you more, assuming all costs are the same.
Yep. And
And the
also,
quality may not be as high. So,
yes.
do you want to spend more on lower quality? Is kind of what I'm hearing.
And then on top of that, do it accidentally almost, right? Like not even know that the guy actually is a plumber that's fixing your car or whatever, right?
Mm,
So um, organizations that run this survey have no idea, you know, no
yeah,
idea. It's shocking to discover. And again, if like you want to do that and you want to be intentional about it, then probably you can improve the quality and you can improve the cost a little bit. It's not what I would recommend, but I don't think it's impossible. But you accidentally pay the plumber what you would pay the car mechanic to fix your car, and it's like more expensive than it should be, and it's not as good a quality. Like, why would we do that? Why would we do that?
Right. If you were to pitch it to somebody that way, nobody would actually sign up to do that and pay for
Right.
that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm senior director or something at a company, senior director of design, or maybe even product engineering, any one of those, and I suspect this could be happening in our organization, I want to kind of get my hands around it. How would we do that?
Yeah. So we have a survey that we made available publicly. You can duplicate it and you can run it in your org. It's been through several PhD level research folks, so I'm pretty confident that it's like the methodology is good. And we actually even created a template for presenting the output. For example, when we first started, we were just looking at hours, and somebody had the insight to convert that to full-time employees, and that was really was very compelling. So all that stuff is on our website. We're happy to have people take it and do it. What I'm interested in, and I haven't shared this with you, Zach, yet, is I would be really interested in seeing if we could get, a dozen. No organization really wants to come public, like, oh, we did this and it was crazy, like crazy pants, as we say. But if we could get like a dozen organizations to do that and then share their findings with design maps so that we could publish some kind of document that said, I mean, it's a small sample size, but, small, medium, and large organizations found this percentage of shadow design happening in their organization. And then, people from there could abstract to what might be happening in their own. I think that would be really interesting and be really useful for design organizations as a whole, kind of rising tide raises all ships thing. So if people do that, I would love to help, chat with them, hear their results, at the very least hear the results, and I'm happy to do whatever I could to help in advance.
Yeah. Knowledge is power, and the more we know whether or not that's happening in an organization, the more we can fix it. Shall we say, shining a light on the shadow design? Nice. You can have that one for free, Audrey.
I'm gonna put 20 in the mail for you right after.
I will be here all week.
So a couple of things about the survey that I think are really interesting. We are seeing like a gamut of reactions within organizations to running it, to wanting to run it. Like some organizations are like, fuck no, like, why do we need to do that? Your little survey is not of interest. And you can probably, I don't know if you do, I guess that there are some like political undertones and desire to maintain control. And so there's kind of that reaction, which takes some additional work to kind of work through the concerns and make sure they're addressed. On the other end of the spectrum, what's interesting to me is mostly when we encounter this with our clients, I see like an engineer that's the front end engineer that loves design, or the product manager who doesn't know what else to do or really loves it or whatever. Like I see a little resistance to design being taken away, but actually that turns out to be like, there's a whole other side of it, which is we're seeing product managers and engineers in response to the survey saying, in some organizations, like, I love working with design. I think that output is better. I think it's faster. Either I don't know how to work with them or they weren't available to help me. And we're actually having product managers reach out to Design Map to say like, hey, I'm a product manager. I'm doing shadow design for my organization and I don't have time. And there's other stuff that only I can do that I need to do. So could you help me? So there's this like spectrum from like resistant, I don't want to do it, I don't want to talk to it, to like welcoming it and embracing it. And I think that has to do a lot with I don't really like the word politics, but the social stuff happening in the organization and what the relationship is to the design team and the design leader and all that stuff. But it's super interesting to me how many people are supportive, non-designers are supportive of sussing out shadow design and reducing it at least.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that design practice is probably pretty open to knowing about design that's happening outside of their knowledge or influence, however they would phrase that.
Yep.
I could absolutely see political landmines to step on elsewhere,
Yep.
team doing shadow design, assuming it's just good enough and it's fine. But the interesting thing is, a lot of what you just described reminded me of the episode we had with Joe Natoli, and he talked a lot about how much of these decisions around fighting what decisions should be right or wrong in terms of like product strategy or design strategy often come out of fear. Like they're fear-based decisions, and
I
so it's
remember
interesting.
let's talk about that. Yeah.
It's interesting to me to think about, like, as you said it politically, but maybe like just exchange the word for fear. I would have to think that getting to the heart of whatever the fear is would help you address it. And interestingly enough, if this is, I'm not picking on product management, we love those folks, obviously, but if it's a product management team and they're doing design and it's just like, look, I don't want people to know that that's happening, or, for whatever fear, I think getting to the place where you can fully understand why that fear exists
Totally.
as a way to introduce like an opportunity for education of that this is actually not a valid fear. And in fact, if we can get to the bottom of this and figure out the actual cost impact of shadow design, your life will probably get better as a result. There's actually nothing to be afraid of, right?
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And probably their fear is valid if it were what we were after, right? And just it's a good opportunity to say, I'm not saying like lay off a bunch of product managers or lay off a bunch of engineers and hire a bunch of designers. I'm not saying that at all. But if there's some budget that can be reallocated, or if there's, when there's attrition, a head gets moved over to the design team, or if there's a pool of headcount that, we're doing annual planning, right? That maybe design gets a few more than engineer than they would have otherwise. Like that's what we're talking about. So that's maybe like the first fear is like, I'm going to lose my job if we run this survey. And I don't think we need product managers as designers and engineers. We need product managers to be able to do our jobs. And and we need them to be able to do product management stuff. And so that's what we're trying to do. And then I do think that there's another fear, which is control. And see this, we've done this with research teams as well. And I think research is a really interesting thing because if you run a really effective research team where everybody is like, holy smokes, what amazing insights, like forehead slappers, 10 of them in that one interview, then you build like a following and very quickly, and we've seen this happen in many organizations, demand outstrips supply. Like there are way more product managers that want to go out there and talk to customers than research teams can support. And it's great. And we love it when product managers talk to customers. Having said that, I do have a whole workshop on how to like have effective conversations with customers. But a lot like product managers in that setting might feel like, oh, you're not going to let me talk to customers anymore. Like, I don't want to lose that control. Or you're not going to let me draw screens anymore. I don't want to lose that control. You're not going to let me hire my own agency anymore. I don't want to lose that control. It's like a control thing, right? And so we say like, if that's what works for you and that works for our organization, then great. You can maintain control of that, but I can support it by providing oversight for your design agency so that they're consistent and you don't have to deal with the inconsistency issues later. Or I can provide training for you and the other product managers so that you guys can do more quality research that gets you better answers to the questions that you're asking so that you can make more informed decisions. So that it doesn't need to be a wrestling for control conversation. It's just like, as you say, we're shining light in the shadows, and then we're being intentional about how we do less shadow design and do better shadow design, whatever that means for your organization.
Yeah, I really like the way you sort of ended that thought and the way that you said that. I think that that's really, really useful for people to think about. And the thought that occurred to me as you were describing that is, if you were to shine a light on shadow design, so to speak, and you have that knowledge, just as you kind of ended, you at least have the ability to make choices. You might choose that the way we're working is the way that we want. Hey, guess what? That's good to know, because if you didn't know that these people outside of design roles, we're doing all this design work. Now, and that's
Yep.
at least useful information for you to have. That's the first thought that I had. The second one that occurred to me is, by getting that understanding and, potentially addressing it, like, let's say you look across shadow design happening at your company and you determine that actually there's enough of this going on where we could easily hire even a junior designer for that, and likely the quality would get better. It's actually a compounding effect, because not only are you then placing, in this case, design in the hands of somebody specifically trained for that, that's likely going to produce higher quality output, but you're also allowing everybody else who was participating in shadow design, willingly or not, the ability to do better work that they are expertly trained in.
Yep.
So it's actually a multiplicative effect.
Absolutely. Totally. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And so I think there are, maybe 5 strategies that we can employ in order to address shadow design, right? One is, okay, we get that designers, or the research, like design and research interchangeably, like we get more headcount. Sorry. Oh, cough. It's not COVID. You're not here. But anyway, so we got some more headcount through attrition, or as the organization is growing for design. That's not going to be enough. Like, my prediction, and we can have another podcast in 60, and I'll eat my hat on your podcast if I ever see this happen. And then the organization is just like, oh, well, we're going to do that many FTEs. We're going to add that headcount to design. Boom, done. Like, that's not going to happen. And even if it does, like, it's going to trickle out, and it's important to keep running this survey. So you kind of keep an eye on it, right? 2 is budget, right? Like, get some budget allocation over to design so design can hire consultancy. And then a third is Operation Bear Hug, I call it. So if that front end engineer like loves design more than anything, like, let's move them over to the design team. Or business analysts. Like, I think BAs are designers anyway, just in writing pictures. So put them in the design team.
Yeah.
But also, like, we can get in front of it and call it our parade. So we find a bunch of shadow research or a bunch of shadow design. Let's provide research training. Let's provide design training to the organization. But all of this happens kind of so it can get a little better. Are we going to turn a front end, or even a back end engineer into a great designer? Probably not. Are we going to turn a product manager into a great researcher? Maybe. The skills that you need to be successful for good product management are often different than the skills that you need to be good at research. Anyway, but it all kind of happens under this umbrella of, like, we have a clear objective for design in this organization, and the quality of work that we do, the KPIs or OKRs, and all of this happens kind of under that umbrella. And it's probably going to be a combination of these things that you use to reduce, probably never eliminate, shadow design. And then if you keep running the survey and keep trying these techniques, like, it should get better and better.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. Again, I mean, I think that just goes back to, like, having that knowledge allows you to make decisions about that, allows you to make choices. But if you don't know that it's occurring, you have no decisions to make, and you just sit around wondering why maybe our quality isn't quite where we want it to be, or our velocity isn't quite where we want it to be. If you're, agile folks, or whatever the case may be, you have the ability to act, right? The other thing that really came to mind as you were describing this further, because it is something that's come up a lot as we discuss ROI of UX, is risk mitigation. Right? So if you think about what the ROI of UX is, or research, or anything that we do that we would call under design or UX, a lot of it's actually risk mitigation, right?
Yep.
Are we making decisions that are going to double our development effort and cost when they could have been avoided by perhaps a more elegant solution that actually takes less effort, thereby reducing cost? That's like a really simple example. But the other one is, are we are we doing something and shoehorning something into the product that actually potentially causes like a security risk or a major usability flaw, which then actually helps, hurts our chances to grow, or things like this. And these are all things that designers are specifically trained to do. These are all things that researchers are all specifically trained to, like, understand and then be able to translate to a team actively working on that. It is a combination effort.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah. You could even, I just made this up, so we'll see if it makes sense, but you could call it like in risk intentionality. Like, okay, we have design and research teams working on these products, and they are working to mitigate the risk that the user won't be able to use it, that they won't find value in it, da, 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 da. And then over here, there's a lot of shadow design happening. I'm not getting a lot of receptivity to my reducing the shadow design. And so we're going to leave that, and it's risk to have to play out however it plays out. Somebody, a VP of design that I was talking with recently, called that strategic sacrifice, right?
sure.
But again, it's intentional. Yep. Like all of this is just about intent. It's not about perfection. It's just about intentionality. And as you say, like, what are we investing today? Wouldn't that be better spent getting better, more efficient design, and also freeing up engineers, product managers to do what they're trained and educated and experienced and paid to do better. Yeah. So it's, yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, reminded me of something else I thought of when you were describing this, is I can imagine that there's potentially product managers, engineers, people in marketing even, like, that are being asked to do some of this stuff that maybe every time they do, they go, man, this sucks. This isn't part of my job. I don't want to do that. And the thing you risk, again, it's risk mitigation. The thing you risk there is you're burning somebody out that might be a really awesome product manager for your organization. And they're looking for a job because they don't want all of that additional responsibility, maybe that they didn't sign up for.
Yeah. 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 I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, it's for sure burning folks out, putting demands on them that they didn't sign up for, aren't trained for. They feel like it slows them down. And I really have been surprised how many people have said, and non-designers have said, I don't want to do all this design work. Mm-hmm. Because mostly what I hear when I talk to people, I don't know if it's probably just the volume, right, of the number of people who are taking this survey now. They don't want to do it, or they want to do it with the designer. They want to have a conversation with the designer. And I do want to say, like, I get in trouble in a couple of ways. I get in trouble in lots of ways, but
I had a feeling that was probably the case.
Here are a few that I know about. One is, I'm not saying that all product managers suck at design. I'm not saying that all engineers or QA people suck at design. Like, that's not true. Some of them are great at it. And so it's not about them. It's just about the unintentionality. And again, sort of like how we're investing and how consciously we're investing our money. So that's one thing that I get in trouble for. Oh my God, I totally lost my train of thought. I made notes. Let's see if I can find it in my notes. What was I just talking about? I'm glad you're going to do a little bit of editing. What was I talking about? Getting in trouble for
making sure that PMs don't think you are suggesting they're shit at design and then
second design, right? I can't remember. I'm sorry. Oh, I got it. I did have it in my notes. I just didn't have short enough notes. So the other thing that I want to be careful to say is, like, if a product manager, an engineer, anybody is drawing a screen because they want to engage in a conversation with a designer, whatever that conversation is, like, I had this idea, or I don't know how to communicate, but if it's the beginning of a conversation, I would not call that shadow design. I would just say, like, that person draws pictures to communicate, and that's totally cool. Like, please keep doing that. That's great. If the picture is the end of the process, like, this is going to production, or something very close to this is going to production, that's what I would call shadow design. Yeah. So, we still want to talk with them, and we still want to invest time in design in a collaborative way. Like, is this meeting the business needs? Is this addressing the market that you envision? Is this technically feasible? Like, none of that counts as shadow design. That's just what we do as a team when we're collaborating and doing design. But what I want to call out is, like, I'm alone designing a screen that's going to go into production. boom, what we don't want to do unintentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And a common theme with everybody we talk to, I feel like on this show too, is like having empathy for people you work with, not just for customers and people you do design for or research with. And I think that that's really important here. A couple things that came to mind. Number one, I always tell people, remember, most people in your organization, most people in the team you work on and other teams you work with are not intentionally malicious. They are
Yeah.
not out to get you. They're not out to steal your job. They're not out to undermine you. Everybody's really just trying to do their best work. Right. So, like, starting from a place of understanding that. The other thing that came to mind is like, there's a lot of design adjacent people, is the way I'll describe it. Product managers, engineers, marketers, they can do design, but maybe they're not trained to do design at the level we would expect for production. That doesn't mean they can't participate in design. I think that's what you're suggesting. That's what it sounds like to me, is we're not suggesting anybody stop participating in design. We're
Right.
simply saying, like, be in the intentionality about where and how that's happening. Because the third point, where again, I'm trying to place myself in the shoes of somebody, like if I'm an engineer and I'm being asked to just design stuff, most people don't find joy and comfort in doing stuff that they're not at.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I feel like if I'm an engineer and I sit here and I go, "Well, I'm not good at design and I'm being asked to do this," it's probably a really uncomfortable part of my job. And likely I welcome a partner in that. I probably still want to participate in it because I like having an opinion. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And those are actually extremely valuable, by the way. You
Yeah.
should work with your development and other team partners for quality design. But just keep in mind, like, these folks a lot of times recognize, like, hey, that's not what I'm good at, and I would love somebody to kind of pass the baton to, but still participate in the race, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We need our product management partners and our engineering partners in particular to work with us to make sure that we're meeting our objectives with the products on all fronts. And a lot of times, great ideas come from engineers who understand what's technically feasible, or product managers who have looked at the competition in detail and see a gap, or we want all that stuff to happen. And I'm not trying to call any of that stuff out with this shadow design. Um, a lot of it probably is production design when we talk about shadow design.
Mm-hmm.
It's just when somebody's doing it alone, and that's the end of what's going to happen. That's what we want to measure and and adjust for.
Yeah. One of the things I've found is that when, as a trained design and research product strategy person myself, what I've found, one of the biggest valuable interactions that I've found with when working with those people, is that they have an excellent perspective on the big picture, and I'm able to round out the details. So we're often on the same page already,
Mm-hmm.
right? But they are able to round out the details in terms of effort or cost or market size and um, like you said, like competitive landscape. Whereas trained designers are able to get into the details of exactly how we execute the right thing. So we can all come to the right thing together. And then designers tend to be extremely focused on the details of executing that. And that's where good products can become great products, or good services can become great services. And that's the value you get from having a team and somebody dedicated to do that, right? And I think that that's really what you're driving at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of what we do also is like describing the vision, or developing alignment. That's a lot of the work that we do. And I don't know, to be honest with you, that would get pulled out in shadow design, because I don't think a lot of people are jumping in and saying like, uh, we need a vision type now, and I, product manager, I'm going to create the vision type um, by myself. Uh, but in any case, that sort of like we all want to feel like we're contributing meaningfully at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think each of those three disciplines of the triad have areas where we can kind of see the big picture and areas where we can contribute detail. And it's critical that we're all able to do that in order to succeed. So that's great. Let's all do that for sure. Let's just not assign somebody else's job unintentionally.
Right. Or take a single job and distribute it across multiple people who don't want to do it and would even raise their hand and say, I don't think I'm doing this well, right?
And
Um,
accidentally. Yeah.
yeah, totally, totally. Um, I'm realizing that we're kind of coming up to the end of the time we have together, which I need to be respectful of that for you. And the way that we typically end these things, right, is I say, if I forgot everything we talked about, and somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, Audrey, what was that all about?" And what would be the way you would answer that question and summarize this chat?
Yeah. I think the summary is that we know that a lot of design work is being done within organizations without anybody knowing it by non-designers. We would call that shadow design. And we think it's important to bring that to light, so that we know how much shadow design is happening and then employ various strategies to make sure that we can improve the quality of that design work, we can improve the efficiency of that design work, and we can improve the efficiency of the other disciplines that are being leveraged to do design work that maybe don't want to or don't like to or aren't good at design. So I think that's how I'd boil it off.
Really well said. I was here and I do remember, and I think that's a great summary.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, this is awesome. A topic that I haven't heard anybody else talk about, so super useful, and I think everybody listening to this, it would at least raise an eyebrow to and likely take action on. We're gonna have links to the survey, and you wrote an article about this too, talking a bit more about it. But is there anything else that you want to share with folks? How to get in touch with you, how to keep conversation going, or anything else you want to share with folks listening that we didn't cover yet today?
No, it would be, I would love to hear again if people are going to run the survey or have run the survey. We'd like to collect that and kind of raise the awareness of this as an issue and maybe elevate design teams and improve the success of those like ROI of design conversations or change them. So that'd be great. We're at designmap.com. If you do find shadow design happening and you get some budget allocated, feel free to call. We'd be happy to help with that. And then the last bit, I doubt that anybody listening to this podcast needs to read this book called What CEOs Need to Know About Design. I say book, it's like a long pamphlet. It's a short read, and it's kind of 101-y, it's 10,000 words on the very basics of design. There's lots that's oversimplified and left out, but we do find that handing that to heads of product, CEOs, like, can be helpful, and just not having the conversation about like, why don't the wireframes have color in them? We can like
Yeah,
start with like at least a basic foundation of shared understanding. And the survey is mentioned in the book as well. So maybe that could be helpful.
awesome. Those are awesome resources. We'll have links to all that stuff, links to where folks can find you on social media, on the internet, and continue the conversation, ask questions if they want.
Cool. Thank you so much, Zach. It's always
Definitely.
good to talk to you. And I'm excited to get this idea out here and out there and help all design organizations hopefully get a little bit more leverage.
Likewise. Love having you on. Appreciate you coming back for round two.
Yeah.
And yeah, cool. So all right, everybody, we'll see you next time.